Good afternoon and welcome to the Citizens Advisory Committee on December 14th, 2023 at 4 p.m. And welcome to participants in person and those of you online. This is for our 2024 Human Needs Funding Allocations. So I'm going to call the meeting to order officially. And we will start with the land acknowledgement. Molly, if you're able to unmute and do the land acknowledgement.
We acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Snohomish people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society.
Thank you, Molly. Okay, so guests who are on the call, if you want to go ahead and turn off your cameras and mute yourself, and you want to keep that off unless you're called upon to speak. And then committee members, if you are able to turn your cameras on, that would be great. Okay. So the public can access the meeting through various ways. So there's, you can view the hearing on the Everett TV channel or Everett YouTube channel. You can call in on the public call-in number, which is 425-616-3920, conference ID 724-887-726. hashtag, or you can access the hearing online through the Microsoft Teams meeting link on the Citizens Advisory Board webpage at everettlaw.gov. So members of the public wishing to provide comment for discussion during the meeting may email comments to the doorway, so that's VDORWAY at everettlaw.gov, or you can provide comments when the public hearing portion of the meeting opens. So with that, I'd like to pass the agenda over to the chair.
Okay, thank you, and welcome to tonight's meeting. So I'm going to start first with a roll call for the committee members. And first off, Christina Ahu is excused tonight. I'm wondering if Matt Bissell has joined us. Josh Bruner.
Present.
Present. Thank you, Josh. Okay, Molly Everhart.
Present.
Samantha Hussain. Hey, Michelle Martin. That's me, and I'm here. Susan Mossart. I'm here. Good. Michael O'Gorman.
Here.
Thank you, Michael. All right. Okay. And so with roll call completed, we're going to move on to staff. Would you care to introduce yourself?
I will. So I'm Vicki Doorway, and I'm a Community Development Specialist.
And Kimber Landry, Community Development Manager here in Madison.
Okay. Great. So just going to share the standard rules of our procedure tonight for committee members. I will be calling on each committee member during the discussion. Tonight's meeting is a complex hybrid approach, so we ask that you use the Teams raise your hand feature if you would like to ask a question or make a statement, and this applies to those in person as well as those online. Okay, and at this time, we'll turn it back to staff for presentations.
I'm going to take a quick moment to do some adjustment so that we can get the shared screen up, and then I will, when you guys see the PowerPoint, okay, so tonight you're here for the 2024 Human Needs Priority and Funding Overview. I want to thank everybody first for also making a quick adjustment. We had initially slated this public hearing for Tuesday, and then had a wonderful volunteer committee appreciation event that night, and so we bumped the hearing to today. So thank you to everyone that was able to make the quick jump over. Okay. So, Human Needs Funds, we're going to get into some basic overview for Human Needs Funds, just to revisit what type of funding source this is, and then we're going to get into some of the mayoral directives, which are our priorities for this year. So again, Human Needs Funds are municipal funding, which means that it's an annual set aside from the city's general budget that is set by mayor and council. It also runs on a calendar fiscal year, which is consistent with the city's budget cycle. Since 2021, we have also had the ability to do what's called rollover, where we can have any unused funds to roll over into the next program year and be reallocated. That's great, because now we can just kind of add a little bit more to the pot if it hasn't been used by prior program year. Funds and the Citizen Advisory Committee are also regulated under the Everett Municipal Code, Title II, Chapter 93, if anybody's interested in looking that up. And of course, then recommendations by, okay, balance that, but I see Afifa. I'm going to try and do both. Do that? Yeah, if you could switch over there real quick. There's a mouse for that, that'd be great. Okay, so recommendations are under the approval and adoption of mayor and city council. So the Citizen Advisory Committee makes a recommendation on the funds, and those are then given to administration, city council to adopt. Okay, next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of this fund source, just because it's gone through some changes in the last few years, and it's important to revisit where this comes from. So in 1989, the city started to reserve $3 per capita. That was in response to human service needs that the city was seeing. It kind of continued in its in a very kind of, I guess, straightforward manner for a while. But then in 2016, the city was seeing an additional need, and so an additional $1 per capita was allocated to respond to what was first identified as the Community Streets Initiative Task Force, and then the subsequent Mayoral Safe Streets Program Initiative that came under Mayor Franklin. And then in 2020, award allocations started to focus on providing larger award amounts for better leverage and support impact. This was a concentrated effort by staff with the committee, so that we went away from what we used to call a peanut butter approach, and went to try and take a better approach so that funds could be better leveraged, not only by community partners, but also so that when we put out grants, we're giving people sufficient enough funding to not only administer the grant, but actually still deliver services. Because it can be onerous to go through and deliver a public fund grant, and if you're only getting $3,000, then sometimes you spend a little bit more in staff time. So we wanted to make sure that we were having good impact with the funds that we were putting out. So we started making that change with the committee in 2020, and then in 2021, staff was able to work with our finance department and administration and city council to again allow for unused funds to have a rollover in the budget cycle. And then in 2022, staff actually did a funding review for human needs funds, And we really wanted to, with that, focus on aligning community partners with needs, and then also just looking at some of the funding trends that happened with human needs, just because it had gone through so many changes. I will say that some of the neat things that have kind of come out of this also is that from that Community Streets Initiative Task Force and the Community Streets Mayoral Safe Streets Program Initiative, we have actually had more than just a response from human needs from those efforts. That's where our community outreach and enforcement team with police and the embedded social workers really started. We had other partnerships that the city was doing at that time. And so that actually helped to really kind of create a little bit of sustainable models elsewhere, and then also start to really kind of get into what was going to be an ongoing community partnership for services. So it's just a neat little thing that came forward from reviewing the history on all of that. I guess the other thing I'll just add is, again, when we did make the change for award allocations, we used to give, when we gave smaller awards, we used to give up to around 40 awards a year. And that was also, not only was that onerous, I think, for some of the agencies to have to execute really small grant amounts and trying to still have a good return on that, but also it was a lot for staff. We were a very, very lean team. The staff that you see in this committee, which is Vicki and myself, is the staff to help to execute and carry forward this funding, as well as our other federal and our state funds. And so this was something that also allowed for us to now have better relationships and better grant management with not only internally, but also with our community partners. We're able to give a little bit more guidance now, because our attention's not as divided as it used to be, and of course now also the benefit to the agencies is that they get more funds as well, whether they're awarded to support their wonderful programs. So just a couple little things that I wanted to elevate when on this slide for the fund evolution. But we'll go ahead and dive in now to the next slide, which are the 2024 annual priorities. So for 2024, following, of course, a very active couple of years with funding, we had taken the step towards establishing some of the mayoral directives as our annual priority needs, because these were efforts that had been made earlier in the year to really identify needs that were specific to the Everett community, and not just needs that we were seeing kind of on a county or regional effort. And so the mayoral directives, there were 5 of them. If you are looking at the screen, you'll see that I'm missing number 4, and that's because we did not pick up number 4. Number 4 was a climate change directive, and so when we looked at the directives that human needs funds could support, we carried forward the violence prevention and reduction directive, the behavioral health directive, the housing choices for all, and the Prosperous City Directive, which the last one's probably the most wide-ranging one out of all of them. And so I'm going to get into a little bit of each initiative that can help be supported by the Human Needs Funds, and then we're also going to see which agency applications fell under which directive. Now, I also want to just pause here and also say to the committee, typically we haven't really taken this approach. We just kind of throw everything up on the screen for you guys at one time. We are trying to have a little bit of a better clarity of presentation so that we can address questions about programs and content and applicability to the priorities and those discussions first, and get everybody to at least understand all the applications. If there are any questions on the applications that were that may not have been either fully reviewed or maybe you had a question during it, we want to address that first, and then allow us to then, once we make the funding recommendations, have a more educational conversation and insightful conversation, knowing all the programmatic components of each program. So, Vicki, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So, these are the agencies that applied that were able to be fit under the Housing Choices for All directive. And I'm just going to mention this real quick, and then I'm going to pass it over to Vicki so that she can help to give a little bit more information on each program. But overall, the intent with this directive is that we wanted to sustain and increase shelter options. We wanted to support renters and homeowners. We wanted to mitigate impacts of gentrification, and I'm so sorry, this mask is not helping long words for me, but we wanted to mitigate impacts of gentrification and displacement, and we also wanted to preserve existing affordable housing. And so that's the overall goal and intent for this directive. And specifically, when we ended up seeing the applications that came in, we had 2 initiatives. So each directive has a couple initiatives listed on there. And we were able to see the initiative 3, which is increase and protect affordable housing to prevent or mitigate the impacts of displacement and gentrification. We have 2 agency proposals that are helping to support that initiative, and that is, of course, the Snohomish County Legal Service Legal Aid and the Salvation Army Rent Assistance Program, and then Initiative 4, which was to sustain and increase shelter options with services and support for our unsheltered population. We see Cocoon House, DVS, and Interfaith helping to support those 3, those 3 agencies helping to support that initiative. So now I'm going to hand it off to Vicki so that she can give a little bit more information on the programs that are presented.
Extremely limited, like one sentence. So just, I mean, obviously to all our wonderful organizations that we work with and all the organizations who applied for funding, it's hard to take, 10 pages and nail it into one and keep it within the time frame of our hearing. So this is just kind of a general of what they do. So for the Cocoon House Journeys program, they provide housing and services to homeless young adults between the ages of 18 to 24. And then DVS, Domestic Violence Services of Snohomish County, provides advocacy and counseling to youth at their shelter who have been impacted by domestic violence. And then the Interfaith Family Shelter, this grant is for case management to support families who are experiencing homelessness at multiple locations. And then moving on, Snohomish County Legal Services. This is free legal services for persons who have multiple legal issues which directly impact their housing stability. And then Salvation Army's proposal is for rental assistance for Everett residents to help prevent eviction.
Great. Okay, so now we're going to go and take a look at 2 other mayoral directives. So we had the Violence Prevention and Reduction Directive, and again, the overall intent with that one was violence prevention, but also interruption and response programs. Specifically, there's an initiative that's somewhat supported by the proposal that we received, and that's the Initiative 2, which was to develop and launch community violence prevention and response programs in partnership with community organizations. And so we had one agency hand in hand, which came up with a proposal for gang and violence prevention services. And then we also had our Prosperous City directive. And overall, this one, when I was saying that this one's a bit more wide range in what it could cover for activities, when we put this out in our application rollout and notification for funding, the intent with this one was to do a couple of things, and that was to expand recreational and cultural offerings in historically underserved areas. It was also to increase inclusive playground options and facilitate connections between businesses and workforce groups. And so we see that what the real intent with the Prosperous City is that it's meant to be able to provide any variation of something that could be from employment to childcare to something that's relative to cultural art. But it's really something that would help to allow for people to, again, become prosperous and be able to revisit or return back to work or other efforts. Under that directive, though, we also just had one applicant for that, and that was the Shack Art Center, and a application that would be a satellite location in the North Everett area. And so with that, I'll pause there and see if Vicki has any more to add.
So the hand-in-hand violence prevention and reduction. It's gang and violence prevention, focusing on strategies for middle and high schoolers and their families. And then the Shack Art Center is to support their satellite location at Madrona Square Housing Community in the Delta neighborhood, to provide art enrichment programs to increase behavioral and emotional health of the residents and the community.
Great. And one more directive that we're going to pop up, and that is for behavioral health. And so this directive, the overall intent, again, was to develop new strategies and also to advance work by behavioral health providers through gaps in capacity. Specifically, Initiative 4 is supported by some of the programs that we see, which was, again, to advance the important work local behavioral health service providers and organizations are doing to address the behavioral health crisis. And then, of course, we have all the agencies listed here that were able to meet that. And so, Vicki?
Okay, so the first one is the Child Advocacy Center at Dawson Place, where there's multiple partner organizations where it's one location where services for abused children, such as behavioral health, victim advocacy, child's forensic interviews, and other services can be provided kind of in one location. Child Strive has their family counseling and group counseling for the Casino Road area, and they're also providing case management as part of that. Compass Health, this proposal is for counseling for homeless youth at Cocoon House.
Before we also change the slide here, since this is the end of the annual priorities that we've identified on the mayoral directives, I want to acknowledge that we have additional 3 other proposals that did not meet priorities. That does not necessarily mean that they don't get recognition. It just means that when we were looking at addressing how programs aligned with the priorities established by the committee, we had 3 that fell out of that scope and range. But you will see them on the funding recommendation sheet when it gets pulled up.
And I'll continue, there's 2 more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry, anyway, so, the additional proposals under behavioral health included Everett Recovery Cafe, which is, they do a lot, but in a nutshell, it's peer-to-peer support for the Everett Recovery Cafe clients in recovery, supporting them in their recovery. The YWCA Homeward House Collaborative provides services to new and expectant parents facing substance use disorders and who are involved or have the potential to end up involved with child protective services. That's the very nutshell.
Wonderful. Yes, and now we're ready to move forward to the next slide. Okay. So the next slide, so we're going to look at what funding was put out for applications. So we have about $571,000 that was put out that's available for human needs funds. Of that, we put out initially $300,000 that we wanted to do for competitive application, and we also included about $32,000 from rollover funds from unused prior years. But we also have about $241,000 that's been set aside for city-partnered services, and I'm going to get into a little bit about that. The set-aside also is pulled from, council has made an additional $100,000 allocation last year as well as this year, and that is a response to human service post-pandemic needs that have been going on, and a recognition that, of course, that we just constantly have the need to continue to support our service providers. And so with the $100,000 and what was typically seen as a $150,000 amount that had been restricted for prior Safe Streets projects, we're looking at about the same consistent amount that's been allocated in the past for this. And so I want to get a little bit more into what these programs will be, and you again will see them when we pull up the funding recommendation sheet of what the breakdown is. But to talk about them right now, So we have what's been known as the Bridgeways MAP Court program. And that is actually an embedded program in the municipal court. And so you have a city partnered service in something that is a city asset or a city building. And so we're having we're moving forward with a recommendation for funding for them. We also have the Homage Community Table at Carl Gibson, which of course is another program that is situated inside a city asset. That's the Carl Gibson Senior Center. VOA and Homage have been working as service providers to help to address needs for seniors inside the Carl Gibson Center. We also have the Hot Meal Coalition program. This past year, that's been picked up by the Volunteers of America, and that has been an ongoing effort of love, I would say, over the years between the city and meal partners. We really started to get more involved in that relationship when we saw multiple hot meal providers coming to the Human Needs Committee at the time and asking for funding, and it ended up splitting up funding across different programs. And so what we've had over the years is a coalition that was created to help really allocate and bring all resources together so that hot meals programs can instead go to one source and be able to pick up everything from takeaway containers to supplemental food to be able to supplement some of the meals that they cook. And so in aligning those resources, connecting hot meal providers with a central location for provision of food, and especially now with VOA picking it up, we have the ability to tap into a much larger resource for those meal providers. And I believe, oh goodness, there's at least over, there might be up to 20 meal providers on that one, but I got to be honest, I might be wrong on that, only because it's another staffer that helps to support that work. But there's been, I mean, we have many. And then lastly, we also have what's going to be Volunteers of America is helping to set up a pallet shelter that will be for homeless families, and that will be also situated on city-owned property, and that is slated to begin occupancy in January of 2024. And so what you've seen is that the city has elevated these programs because these are city-partnered services on city assets or with direct city involvement to help to provide these services, and we've gone ahead and put that out for the $241,000 that is on the screen right now. So we have $332,000 that the committee will be working with for competitive application. And I believe that's the last slide. Great. So I believe now it goes back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So,
Right.
Committee, this next is we've got some discussion on funding recommendations. Were you going to put the funding ones
Yes.
up?
Yes.
Or did we want to have them ask questions?
Ask questions about the.
We could
before
do
get to the- I think
that.
that's what we were thinking. Yeah, I think,
All right.
from what I recollect, we were going, so part of the reason we split it up is that we wanted to see if the committee, before the funding recommendations come up, has
there's
any questions on any of the applications. There are a lot of the organizations who applied that are on the call or here in person who could answer questions. Again, this isn't the public comment portion, and it's not the whole funding discussion, but it's basically an opportunity if committee members have questions that they want clarified before we get into the funding discussion.
Okay, and some of those questions could be around, about agencies accepting a reduced award amount, or what's less than their ask, or a little more detail about the application from your perspective and your evaluation and what's in there. Okay, so committee, does anyone have a question? So I can start with, let's see. Let's start with Molly. Molly, do you have any questions?
Thanks, Michelle. I don't have any questions on the overall kind of framework of everything. I'm eager to get into the conversation about the specific applicants.
Right, okay, all right. Michael O'Gorman, any questions from you on the framework?
I have no questions. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, and Josh?
No questions currently. Thank you.
Okay, and then I'm just going to check to see whether Samantha has joined us online. Right, so in the room, Susan, do you have any questions? I don't have a question. Okay, all right, so I think we're pretty good. I do have a question, though.
Good.
So in looking at the ones, and I think you're going to address it with the ones that don't, that are for other services, and there were 3 applications for those.
Yeah.
Will we be having further information about those 3?
Oh, good clarification. So do you have any quick sentences on the 3 that did not
Yeah,
meet
the 3,
priority?
there were,
Yeah. Very good clarification, Chair. Thank you.
She's on it.
Yes. Okay. So the question was about the other services that did not fall under the 4 priority needs under the mayoral directives. So the first one was the ARC of Snohomish County, and they provide case management and systems navigation, and also utilities and food assistance for people with disabilities or families with a family member who has a disability. And then Housing Hope had 2 applications. One was for their teen and young parent program that provides specialized parenting support and child development support. That's the child and family. So let me go back to the teen and young parent. The teen and young parent, it's family support coaches for teen and young parents who are moving from homelessness. And then their child and family program is specialized parenting support and child development support.
okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So, kind of not hearing any more of those kinds of questions. And would we at this time bring up the draft funding recommendations? Yes. Okay. We just kind of take it all in and have,
Or we can go through it like
kind of go,
line by line.
yeah, let's,
Priority by priority or.
yeah, let's go by the priority groupings that you have and understand them. Okay.
So I guess, we can give a little bit of staff input on this, only to
Yes.
help with starting the discussion, and then it said, so it's, we always try and just continue to do our best effort to present material to the committee. This is something that I'm gonna eventually, I'm gonna get it just perfect at one point, but, there was a prior discussion, our last funding recommendation round for the federal and the state funds, about wanting to see kind of a percentage total of requests against priorities, and so we tried to build that in. One thing that the committee used to do that we wanted to actually kind of move a little bit away from is that there used to be a set aside of funds based on that percentage, and we decided that it was better to just see it overall and then to allow the committee to make funding recommendations based on the programs themselves instead of based on a set-aside percentage of demand. So that's, what you see at the top is the priority and the percentage of what those total requests are, but that does not affect the funding recommendations as they are listed.
No, it's just information for us to absorb.
Correct.
So,
Yeah. When we see the recommendations here, happy to help to provide information that would help the committee in navigating how to do funding recommendations. Some of the staff funding recommendations are balanced between where agencies currently are in their expenditures for their 2023 human needs funds. Some of it's a balance of having conversations with the agencies on things that we found in the budget that we just thought needed more clarification. Some of this is trying to also meet the best intent of trying to meet a high request with, you know, a good balance of funds and doing a little bit more than the reduced request. So, as always, these are all starting points for the committee to start with for discussion, but for the Housing Choices for All, staff would be happy to provide any further information. And I know that this month also you guys got worksheets that you could also do your own funding allocations with. And so if it's better to start with maybe a discussion on how personal funding recommendations differ, or if anything else align, happy to bring those up further.
I propose that we kind of take a glance at the whole spreadsheet and then kind of come back to the housing choices and then go down through.
Break down by priority. Got it.
Right, but if we
Okay.
can do that, and then we can go up and then ask committee members to comment.
Okay, so we will,
Oh,
the other one?
Yeah, and I can go back to it. Okay, so the next one, of course, as we mentioned, we only have one agency that applied for violence prevention. I mean, our base grant that we would ever provide, and of course, that was something that I had mentioned in our previous funding review kind of slide, was trying to do bigger awards. And so again, I just want to remind the committee that we never want to go below 10,000. 10,000 we found was the acceptable floor minimum for an award. That kind of speaks for itself for violence prevention. For behavioral health, of course, this one was the second largest chunk of the pie, with housing being 42%, behavioral health being 31% of the request that we got. That's, of course, no surprise based on what we know is happening at a regional level for all of our needs. Same thing, you know, the balance, based on all the considerations I think I've provided earlier. And, oh goodness, okay, yeah, I guess, continue to go down to the next one, Vicki. Prosperous, city, I think was, I mean, we had only, again, one, request against that one. And then the other services, again, this is where these agencies do not meet a priority need. So we kind of started with, I think, somewhere around the reduced request amount, and we're also looking at 2023 expenditures, and, right at the starting point, for the committee to start working with. And then, of course, we have our totals down at the bottom for where everything's at, for where everything falls, and then the city partner services, which I'm gonna, yeah, we can go ahead and, scroll down there. These, again, are programs that sometimes have actually come forward for competitive application, and so we've actually kind of set them aside knowing that these are city partner services that we're looking at now, and more established. Bridgeway stays consistent at 60,000. Homage, we're gonna maintain at the $25,000 amount that they got last year. VOA for hot meals, we're actually looking to asking for an increase, of about 10,000 from what they got last year, and that's only because, what we provided lasted, but, there's still a high need that we're now seeing. In fact, it's actually increasing from what we talked about with a lot of community partners. They're part of the Hot Meals Coalition, and then the Volunteers of America Everett Pallet Shelter is an amount that we talked to for them to be able to execute case management for the families on that site. So happy to discuss that if need be, but
And just a note while you're looking, so that, the city reserve amount, this 362,000 is going to count down as the committee allocates their funding, so that's not a real number, it's
Okay.
just the formula, so. yeah,
Disregard maybe.
Just ignore that 300, yeah, it's going to change as, the CAC starts to populate with their funding recommendation into the spreadsheet.
Okay. All right. Okay, so committee, are you ready to start with some discussion or questions for staff? And Molly, I can start with you again and try to be consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that I am looking at in sort of this first segment under housing choices for all is sort of looking at the comparison to last year's award and figuring out how we can get as many of the organizations funding in a way that doesn't make them make big cuts. And so obviously the Salvation Army, it puts a little bit of a kink in that approach because they didn't have a 2023 award. But in general, it seems like they're all asking for a little bit more or the same as they got last year. I do wonder if we could bump them all down to exactly what they got last year, if that would give us a little bit more of the wiggle room that we might need to meet our total.
I don't understand, Molly. What do you mean meet the total? Of what they're asking for?
No, the total envelope that we have to work with,
Oh, okay.
which I think we're significantly over if we go with all of their 2024 requests. Is that right?
So that, yes, the total, do you want to scroll down to the bottom to see? And this is of their request. You'll see the totals of their reduced request total. If everyone received their reduced ask, then they're actually under, because we are allocating the 331,772 as part of that.
The way that staff has done the funding recommendation, you've done it within the total amount of funds available. So if we work between that and knowing that, that's kind of where we can know that we can balance based on that. So moving funds around from your recommendation, keeping track of that, would keep us towards balancing, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
and the spreadsheet will also total that
It'll
as
total up
they
as we
get
go.
populated. So
Okay.
the CAC remaining amount will go down. It's hard, obviously, because to put this on one spreadsheet, you wouldn't be able to see it. So, yeah, we might need to be going up and down a little bit as needed, but.
And so as I understand it, we're looking at the priorities, but the Human Needs Fund is one bucket. So moving funds between the priorities is possible, correct?
Right.
Because it's not limited to that priority. So if we notice something down below and we made a proposal to move it from another category and move it to up or down the list of funding, we can still do that.
I believe I tracked that, yes.
Yeah, okay, all right, so we can move between the buckets.
Yes.
Okay, the buckets are the priorities, but we can move funds between those.
Correct, yes.
Okay, all right. So Molly, given that, any proposals you want to make or additional comments?
I guess I would just reiterate my point that I think looking at last year's award and trying to minimize the number of organizations that are getting a cut from last year's award seems to me like a good way to support their kind of continued operation. So, for example, if you've got there's some folks who are getting more than they asked for in their reduced request, and some that are getting less than they got last year. If we could, I'm curious how the numbers would total up if we made it so that folks didn't get a cut from last year across the board. I'm not sure if staff already tried that.
All right, so, Molly, any other comments specific to a funding item, or I'll just move to see if Josh has anything at this point? Okay, Josh, do you have any comments you'd like to make about the proposals?
Sorry, it's kind of like the numbers here. I mean, kind of just based off Molly's things, if we look at what was awarded last year, it'd be 288,000. And I mean, obviously that still keeps us below. I mean, I don't know if I have exact concerns. I have concerns about specific organizations. And I don't know if we're at that part yet, or we're just looking at the overall numbers.
I have a point of clarification.
Sure,
if I may.
Vicki.
So Josh, if I understood you, so, we have not totaled the amount of what the 2023 awards were, because some of these organizations didn't have a grant in 2023. So, so that, you mentioned the 285,000, that is their reduced request, that they had on their grant application. So I just want to make sure that was clear before we continue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vicki. So, as I understood that, that's just the reduced ask by all the organizations, the 285. It's not the 2023 award number.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, no, that I understand. I was saying the total amount listed in the 2023 awards is 288,000, which I was just like just knowing that based off of what Molly was suggesting, like that brings us below the. What was that?
Are you saying you did the math for what the 2023 awards were?
I mean, the ones that are listed in that column. Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And you said that was about 288,000?
288,200.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay. Right, and so that wouldn't include the ones that were new this year.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, Josh, any other comments? And we'll do a few rounds of this.
I guess my only other comment is, so if we're going to look at some of the specific organizations, like what practices are in place by the city to make sure that these organizations are following specific, like, rules and policies, like non-discriminatory.
Right. They're held to a standard.
So good question. So what do we do for monitoring and oversight for awards? Good question. Okay, so besides the information that's embedded in our subrecipient agreements, of which we have anti-discriminatory, we have equal employment, fair housing kickbacks. We have a lot of just what I would call, I guess, just the general provision legalese that you would put in any standard human service agreement. One of the things that city staff does on a fairly regular basis is we take a very, I'm not going to say forensic, but we have a very detailed approach when we look at expenditure of funds. One of the nice things about when I said earlier that we reduced the number of awards, that's allowed staff to have a much more familial kind of relationship with agencies. We look at intake forms. We look at expenditure receipts. We look for duplication of benefit. We look at, we even get sometimes into, marketing or how they not solicit, but reach out to clients. So it's an ongoing effort. We both do this at a human needs level, as well as it's the same standard that we would give for any of our federal agencies as well. We do not discriminate based on funding source. So we take the most stringent approach that we have, which is our federal requirements, and we apply that usually across the board when we're looking at not only internal fiscal controls when it comes to subrecipient spend downs, but also, again, this community relationship component. And that's why also in all the applications we have those DEI questions, because we also want the ability for agencies to not only show us what we see in a very black and white kind of presentation when they expend funds, but also talk to us a little bit about what they do for future efforts as well. So I think I got to the nature of your question, Michael, but definitely correct me if I'm wrong, or Josh, sorry. But definitely correct me if I'm wrong or if you need any other clarification on any of that.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying, yeah.
Great, okay.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Okay, I'm gonna drop down to Michael. Do you have any, questions or comments at this level of our discussion?
No, I think I'm pretty clear on all of this stuff. I do have something rattling in my mind here, but I don't really think it's anything pertinent to what's going on here. I'm going to hold off on questions right now.
Okay, thank you. All right. And I'm just gonna check back to see if Samantha, if you've been able to join us. I just want to remind, I forgot to state it earlier, but Christopher Dingle is excused today. Okay, all right. Okay, Susan, any?
You know, looking at the numbers, I think this is a very fair distribution. I wouldn't know where to pull money from if I was gonna have to pull money. It just feels, really equitable and like people are getting a good chunk. So, I'm open to moving money, but I can't even imagine where I would reduce somebody to give to more to somebody else. So that's just my, take on it so far, but, always open to, robust conversation about that as we move along. I love that word, robust.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
All right, and that leaves me, and the only question that I have is probably around the Shack Art Center, because as I understood that one, you know, this is something new for them to try, and that the, you know, that within their 10,000, you know, as their secondary amount, that they would still be able to initiate the program, but it wouldn't be able to run as long during that. So is there any other thoughts from staff about, has that kind of program been part of human needs in the past?
I can kind of answer. Well, and you're gonna be surprised why I can answer it. So I take a lot of classes at the Shack and, art classes. And one of the things that they do, which this satellite could potentially support more, is that they have students that come from Denny Youth Center.
Okay.
And they are taking art classes as part of their rehabilitation and their support. And it has made a huge difference in the lives of these children who are in the legal system already. So, I don't know what $10,000 or, you know, $20,000 can do for their program, but I'm gonna imagine that it's at least a start for their program.
And then to piggyback off that, and to kind of get to what you were saying for precedence, Denny Justice Program from Shack actually was a prior year subrecipient from Human Needs. It's been like, it was pre-Safe Streets Initiative, I believe. So they may have been part of the peanut butter approach at one time. I mean, that being said, also, of course, this application is for satellite location at the new Everett Housing Authority, Madrona Square location. And so there's a lot of stuff that's already kind of provided in kind with space, and then also being able to, I mean, this is going to serve a variety of demographics, but they're all going to be low-income persons that are in that area. And so I think that there might be a good leveraging of maybe some resources that might help them. But of course, all of it's just a starting point for discussion. So committee's more than welcome to revisit that staff funding recommendation.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for asking. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So we've had an initial discussion on the recommendations. So I think now we move to hear public comment and then come back and do detailed funding recommendations. So at this time, I believe we have quorum based on our numbers, so we're good to go into the public hearing. Well, we're in the public hearing, but into the public comment period. So, so at this time, I need a motion and a second to open the public comment period.
I move that we open the public comment period for this hearing.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you very much. So it's been moved and seconded, and so I would like to declare the meeting open for public comment. And just a reminder of the rules of conduct. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Attendees wishing to speak should raise their hand or stand at the podium and state their name, but we're not going to stand at a podium. We're going to come up to the chair if you're in the room to sit next to the phone. And, and so first we're going to go ahead and get anyone that's currently in the room to speak first. And I believe, Vicki, you're going to be our timer for the 3 minutes.
Yes.
Okay. So I think we have one person in the room, so I would like to invite you up to the chair.
First of all, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here, and it's my first time. And thanks, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has. I'm representing the Everett Recovery Cafe, which is exclusive to Snohomish County. It is part of a network, and it's doing some very profound work in our neighborhood. And so if you have questions about it, or if you're not familiar with it, I'm happy to answer them, or to anyone out there. I'll do my best at any rate.
I have a question.
Yes. To whom
So
I speak?
Sorry, this is Josh.
Hi, Josh. I'm Jane.
Hi. So, hi, Jane. I'm just curious, is there major changes that you're planning to do this next year? Because I'm noticing you're asking for twice the amount that you received last year. So it seems like a big jump. So just curious what changes are intended.
It does look like a big jump, and thank you for asking. So this is how I would frame that. And I want you to know that I am new to the organization, so I'm just going to do my best here. So COVID, and I'm sure many of these organizations are up against the same thing, took a huge swath through everything that the organization was attempting to do. And in 2020 and 2021, they literally had to close doors and were not available, and yet found ways to do outreach into the community to, keep people afloat. Because the real shining star in the Everett Recovery Cafe is that it's about sustained recovery. I can't make that strong enough. It's about picking people up and holding on to them after they've done that really hard work of getting into recovery. It's about keeping them there so that they are launched. So the people who are our recovery specialists are the people that are on the floor. And these are the ones that suffered the most. And when I say on the floor, I mean they're the ones that are in the cafe. They're the vitality, they're the energy, they're the ones who are in sustained recovery and are helping us launch and get that person in and helping them understand what these processes could be and how they can help them. They're their first line of friendship and understanding, and as we like to put it, the radical hospitality that we are open to everyone. So don't be off-put by the word membership, because our bar for membership is extremely low. All we're asking people when they come in for access to our services is that they interact, they come and be clean, meaning free of alcohol, free of drugs, while they're in the cafe experience, and that they agree to come in for a weekly recovery meeting in their recovery circle, and that's really about it. So our recovery specialists are the people that were hardest hit. And so that money jump that we're asking for is so now I'm going to get to the point, okay? The money that we're asking for is to help those people have a little bit of a pay increase over this next funding cycle. They haven't had a pay increase in a while. We're trying to get them up above minimum wage. We're trying to spread this around to the people that are the most important. So that's the big, what I think the majority of this is earmarked for, and hence the double up. But we're open and we're flexible. And thank you, Josh.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So, not seeing anyone in the room, let's go ahead to where we've got the hands raised.
Oh, here, no, Marianne Dillon is first, and then,
Okay, all right, so Marianne Dillon, so you have, comments are limited to 3 minutes. You have the floor.
Should I turn on my camera? Or no, I don't have to. I'm not particularly fond of it. Okay, so good evening or good afternoon to the committee. Thank you very much for having us here tonight. The Homeward House Core Collaborative works to reduce and prevent harm and damage and the cost of the opioid and other substance abuse disorders to current and future generations. We all know the impact that the opioid epidemic has had on our community, and Homeward House for years has been working to reunite families and work with families in safe reunification and visitation. We have an emphasis on nurturing the bond between parents and children. And Homewood House does, if you've ever visited, is an excellent place where parents can provide, can meet with their children, can get resources that they need, can get a shower, can wash their clothes, and cook a meal and have a meal with their children. What we're asking for is just one part-time position. Homewood House is located on 37th and Broadway, right across from the Starbucks and the Stadium Flowers. And that one part-time position is among 4 other parent allies that serve the Everett community. So the benefit is really going directly to the Everett community. And when I talk about a parent ally, that is somebody who has lived experience, who's been through their own struggles and now are working to support other moms and dad and people who are going and working to reunify with their children and their infants. So thank you very much for having us here tonight, and I'm welcoming any questions.
Very much, Mary. Okay, Jim Dean.
Hi, I'm Jim Dean. I'm the Executive Director of the Interfaith Family Shelter. And the first announcement I want to make is for Kimbra. They did put in the utilities and we have electricity at Faith Family Village. So that's the first thing that I want to say is a celebration for that. It's not ready to be used yet, but it's one step closer to get there. So thank you. The work and the money that we asked for in this particular grant is for our scattered site. We did include in this request initially some funding for an additional help with children at Faith Family Village. After talking with Kimbra about that and work there, we're perfectly happy to go with what the recommendation is with to not put it in there. We'll look for other sites and other places to get funding for that. So what I want to say is I want to say thank you to the committee, first off, for the hard work you do. You could all be someplace else tonight and you're here doing this hard work. So thank you. Second, thanks to the staff. I know how much work behind the scenes it is to get to this point. So thank you for all that hard work too. But also thanks to the city for continuing to see housing and families and other folks as a priority and making sure this funding is available for us. So that's all I have. If you have any questions about the requests that we have, I'd be happy to answer, but if not, that's okay too.
Thank you, Jim. Jane, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to committee and staff for this time tonight. I just wanted to check in and let you know that the ARC of Snohomish County. I'm the executive director of the ARC of Snohomish County. Although we don't directly seem to fit into those priorities, we indirectly link to the priorities in many ways. We serve individuals with developmental disabilities and their families, and often individuals with developmental disabilities need extra help linking to resources that might already be available in the county, or the families, the parents are overwhelmed with IEPs, special education therapies, doctors that they just get stuck and cannot fill out the paperwork, cannot find the time in the day to make the phone calls. And that's what we do. We help navigate. And so we link to many of these things. We have many individuals that have dual diagnosis. So they might have a behavioral health diagnosis as well as a developmental disability. And we call the different agencies in the city of Everett and make sure that they're linked to them and do a soft handoff. We can help fill out applications. And we also make sure that everyone that we serve is linked to any type of resources that might help them. That can be Social Security, the Developmental Disability Administration, which can help provide sometimes some caregiving hours or some funding for things, and fill out housing applications. We have staff in this position that attend the many housing meetings in the county and in the city of Everett to make sure that we can link people to resources that are out there. And like most organizations, we doubled the numbers we served this last year with a lot of the funding, the big funding that came into the county and has now been spent for different assistance. We've had people more in need. So thank you for the time to speak up, and thanks for the years of funding that you've been able to help the families.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, great. Are there any other hands raised? So, Wendy Grove, I've seen your hand be raised and then go down. I'm not sure if you're wanting to provide additional comment. I know you're with Everett Recovery Cafe. You probably don't have the full 3 minutes because it's the same organization that James is representing, but I'm assuming you want to clarify something, or so Chair.
Yes, I was attempting to click the hand. I'll make this brief, and I just wanted to respond further to Josh's question. And Jane's right, the recovery specialists are our frontline staff, and they're essential for our services. In last year, we had the recovery specialists' wages were supported by other funding sources, including some COVID money and some of which came from the county. And so those wages were covered 100% by other funding sources, and they are now, with the COVID money gone, we are looking to provide some other sources for that funding. And so that's why it looks like it was an increase, and it is, but it was actually a decrease from the funding sources we had last year. I'm happy to answer a question. Yeah, thanks.
Heard from everybody. Oh, we have Claire Peterson. Okay. So Claire, go ahead.
Hey there. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the committee and the staff work that y'all do. I'm Claire Peterson. I'm the Director of Young Adult Housing with Cocoon House. So I just wanted to introduce myself and the agency. Our Journeys program provides support to young adults ages 18 to 24 who have been literally homeless prior to coming into our program, sleeping outside, and our staff work really closely with them to build skills needed to live independently in the community and prevent that longer term chronic homelessness as they continue to age into later adulthood. So we work really closely with them to build those skills, learn to maintain their apartment, their lease, link to longer term supports, and we have a lot of community partnerships that we're able to lean on as well. So I just wanted to give a brief overview and introduction, and thank you all so much for your hard work.
Thank you, Claire. Do we have any other hands raised? have any written comments to read into the record that staff has?
Chair, we do not have any written comments to read into the record at this time.
Okay. Hearing that we have no further public comments, I'd like to announce that the comment period is closed. Second, to close the public hearing portion.
I move that we close the public comment portion of our public hearing today.
Thank you. Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Susan. Okay. So, we're transitioning now into committee discussion and response to public comments. And so, do we have any individual committee members that want to ask specific questions or respond to what we've heard? And we'll do general discussion in the next section. So this would just be comments about the public comments that we've just heard. Seeing any or hearing any? So we'll move on and to make formal funding recommendations. Okay? All right. So I think we need to bring up the funding again. Everett's going to help you. Okay.
You can stay if you want. They're just going to discuss and make the recommendations. So if you want to hear any of the discussion, you can stay. But yeah. This is all about education. So yeah, you didn't want to oppose on something that I shouldn't be opposing on. Nope, because everyone online can choose whether they want to stay on the call or not. Or so yes, you are welcome to stay. Okay, thank you, Jane. Very good.
Okay. So, kind of to get started, I would propose we kind of take it a section at a time. And Kimbra and Susan Kimbra's back. Susan's out of the room for a moment, but we'll be back. So this time, going back to the buckets that we have, the housing choices for all, I would propose that we would go down each one of these and either affirm the staff recommendation for funding or propose an adjustment. Does that work for the committee? Any comments? Okay, so Molly, if you don't mind, I'm just going to try to use the same order I've been using. Wondering in looking at this first section, do you have any proposals for us or adjustments proposed?
Yeah, no, I think overall it looks fine. No big objections or anything. I guess the Cocoon one is the most over its reduced request, but then again, they had a huge range between their full and reduced request, so that seems reasonable. So yeah, no objections to the staff recommendations.
Okay, and we'll go around and then we'll go back and we'll just affirm it and have you put the numbers in and go through it. So that would be up to Josh now. Josh, do you have any changes you'd like to see or comments concerning the staff funding recommendation for this first section under housing choices for all?
I do have a concern, but it is more at a personal level, whereas as a member of the LGBT community, I have a difficult time supporting giving any money to Salvation Army. Well, I can understand what this is for. I just have a hard time dealing with their discriminatory past. So that's the only part that I'm finding difficult with this. Everything else I am very supportive of.
Do you have any proposals based on your concern, Josh?
I mean, my personal belief I would not be giving money to the Salvation Army, and considering that right now with the proposals that's up there now, we're at 31,772 over the budget. But again, that's more at a personal level. So I don't know enough about what exactly all this is going to have like another opinion other than the fact that, you know, I know how discriminatory they've been to my community. So I guess I would just like to see what the rest of the committee would like to propose. If it's overall that, you know, people feel comfortable wanting to do that, then as being part of the committee and the community, I'll support what the committee is feeling they want to do.
Yes, point of clarification.
So Josh mentioned that we're being over budget. I'm thinking you're meaning from the initial amount of 300,000 that went out for competitive applications. We have rollover funds that Kemba talked about earlier that the city is allowing us to roll some funds over to the next year. So that 331,000 is we're still within budget if we hit that mark. I just want to make sure.
Understood.
That's clear. Yeah. So we do have 331,000 to allocate for these priorities and other services.
Okay.
All right, and I'm just going to check one more time as Samantha has joined us. Michael, giving consideration to this first section, any changes you'd like to see or what?
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Honestly, Josh kind of stole my thunder there because I wanted to bring that up as well. So I will just reiterate what Josh had said, and that's all I have to say.
Yeah, good. I know that the overall umbrella organization of Salvation Army has discriminatory policies, but I did not see that in their application. I don't have their the local, I don't have the application in front of me, so I can't see it. And every application I've read, I read the diversity aspect of it because I too feel really strongly about being supporting diverse organizations that support all of us, LGBTQ, color, gender, all that. So because I don't have the application in front of me, I feel at a loss to be able to address the issue, but Michelle's got her laptop, so maybe she's pulling it up.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm just,
because I want to know about this.
Yeah,
That's a great point.
And I'm just going to jump in as staff. So I think that now, hearing the earlier question that we had in the meeting, or hearing, now I kind of understand the intent of where maybe some of this was getting at. You know, the answer for use of public funds is that, of course, you know, we do not permit any discrimination for allocating for any of this. You know, we would not. There needs to be just cause, if there would be, for rent assistance, which is what this is, the particular set aside. Of course, with that, that's something that we have to look at for also fair housing compliance. And when we're looking at that, that's definitely more of a technical overview. We need to see if somebody's being discriminated against for, you know, poor rental history or criminal background or anything else like that. That being said, I do want to also go ahead and thank our committee member for bringing their own concern with this, as well as kind of also having to do a reminder just to the committee of, you know, always in your positions that you have on the committee, you always have to balance, personal feelings, of course, with what you're having to do with allocations to organizations. So I just have to bring that up just so that we're all having good open dialogue with this as we navigate it. That being said, of course, again, there is completely up to the committee whether or not this is even something to even fund. And at this point, I would say that, staff has not gotten into, when we do rental assistance oversight, we look at, first of all, the location. We need to make sure it's an Everett-based location. We need to make sure there's no duplication of funding that's occurring, so there's not double dipping of funds anywhere. And then, of course, there's a lot that goes back to the individual agency for their own identification of the clientele that they work with. We do our best, and like I said, all of our other provisional oversight that we give, but there's a lot that has to go back to the individual agencies when they do work with clients. And so a fair and best effort for them to be able to work with the clientele that they have. So at this point, I think I'm going to give it back to the committee to have more of an open dialogue on understanding the concerns, understanding something that has been brought up by a fellow committee member on trying to navigate moving forward. I don't know if, to that extent, if we can really give anything that's really conditional, because the nature of the activity is fairly straightforward. Again, we have the standard language that we have in every agreement that would already have this. So as far as additional city oversight, I would need to see what the committee discussion is to even see if there's any option that I can do for helping to address any of the concerns that come up. But to that point, Chair, you also have a committee member with a hand raised.
Okay, I just had one,
Yeah, sure.
reading through the application just now, just glancing at it. It's rental assistance for families, but it doesn't offer any definition of family under the Salvation Army. It's just general. So.
The mission statement of the Salvation Army states that we exist to meet human needs without discrimination. It's right here in their application. This message is at the heart of all our programs. I'm just reading it. Diversity, training, and education opportunities are supported and encouraged for our employees.
So that's what's in the application. Molly?
Yeah, I'm so glad that this was brought up because I embarrassingly wasn't familiar with this, but in the past 5 minutes of totally rudimentary research, I think it's really important that we kind of address this. They talk about, a decade ago or more, the Salvation Army having sought exemptions from federal and state anti-discrimination laws designed to protect LGBTQ communities. So, part of me wonders if there, Kembra, to what you were maybe alluding to, if there's some way we could use the very humble influence we have as a committee to communicate or put, I don't know if it's conditions on the award, but something about, oversight or assurances of anti-discrimination policies specific to this program that would, put the committee and, the community at ease. I don't know if there's any mechanisms for that, but it might be a way to kind of show that the committee has discussed it and feels strongly about it.
Yeah, so to address that, I think that, it goes back to kind of what I just mentioned earlier, which is that we have our standard language for it, and then it's a balance of how involved does the city become or get in individual client selection with agencies, right? And then, and so I think that the language that we have in our agreements, the language that we have for when we have just general, obviously also public fund use, you cannot have discrimination when you're using public funds for many different reasons, and it's usually, and I hate to say this, but I'm just going to call it out. All of these grants are reimbursable grants, and so let me also just address that at the time that we are getting any of the information from the agency, they have already expended the funds. It's just a matter of whether or not we can cover that expenditure through the provisions of the grant and the allocation that was made by the award, right? So if we find through our review that something was done out of compliance and equitability, whatever it might be, then our response is that, okay, well, then we cannot cover that with the grant funds. So I also need to pull that up, because this is also we are coming at it after the fact. We do not give pre-award costs with these funds, which means that we don't cut a check ahead of time and just give it to the agency to work with. So there is a little bit of check and balance there, but again, it comes back, I think, more of a question on to not necessarily fund this activity, but to fund the organization at this point.
Right.
I want to say that rental assistance in general is a very high need consistently in the community, regardless of whatever agency is working to provide the rental assistance, especially in a time when COVID funding is starting to go away. And so that's something to keep in mind, is just general rental assistance provisions, but also that there are many agencies that are conducting rental assistance, some of which we saw during our federal funding round. So with that, I'm going to give it back to the committee.
So I just want to say that if we were scoring this via Amplifund,
Mm-hmm.
this statement that they make about their diversity would get a very low score for me, because they're not giving any example. I'm just going to say how I score stuff. Sorry, I'm giving too much information.
Transparency is good.
But this is just like cut and paste. It's not telling us how they are doing that, or what they're doing, or what they have done, or what they plan to do. So for me, it would get a very low score. I mean, it's good to see it in black and white and hold their feet to the fire, so to speak, but at the same time, I think that it's really an important, like Molly's saying, it's an important piece that we take into consideration. And housing is a huge need in our community. So, I don't know.
So, has the Salvation Army received human need grants before?
No.
I mean, this wasn't for rental assistance,
Not last year.
not last year for rental assistance, but
I think it's been a long time, but it's been
They
a
used
while.
to be the cold weather shelter, so they got
Yeah.
funding for that,
right.
but that was not a competitive application.
Well, and that being said, also, they do work with they work with Snohomish County and other jurisdictions on being able to provide those kind of, shelter response options as well to it. But I believe that there was some human needs award pre-2017 that they may have gotten. That being said, if I'm remembering correctly, it was one of the peanut butter type approach awards, so it was never at the level of funding that we're looking at providing right now, or for the intent of the funding that we're looking at providing right now. So again, I mean, as it's kind of presented, it's a new program to the funding source.
Yeah, and the reading of the application states it's for rental assistance for families, and it doesn't define that, and it doesn't define that further, and your application process and all the forms that they have to sign say that they can't discriminate.
Correct.
So, okay, give a point. It's about,
More information.
lack of information on if they're planning to discriminate. We don't know that at this point. So,
Yeah, correct. This was not.
We know past practices, and the reputation of, but we don't know existing practices or future practices.
Correct.
based on this.
I wish, this is one of the efforts where this is why we try and get a lot of input from committee members prior to the hearing sometimes for questions, so that we can kind of bring these
Right.
kind of questions and answers back for when we actually have the hearing. It will be really hard in moving forward if we have a conditional award for this. So I am unfortunately going to have to push back on the committee to make a hard decision on whether or not to fund this tonight. Because you know, outside the parameters of what I've already discussed, we really just do not have much of an ability to do a conditional award otherwise, by staff, so.
Well, let's do this, committee. Let's, you know, I've heard nothing but agreement on the first one with the staff recommendation. And so we could just go ahead and start filling it out, and maybe let's all think about what we want to recommend at the end on the Salvation Army one. And let's lock in the ones that we're okay with right now. Okay? Is that an okay process? Okay. Speak up online or raise your hand if, okay. So we'll slide down to the next one, which is the hand-in-hand gang violence prevention. So committee, is there agreement to go ahead and go with what staff is recommending on this one? I'm going to take silence as agreement. All right? Yep. Okay. Now, going into the next grouping, so we have, the only one that we have in this grouping that didn't receive an award in 2023 is the Child Advocacy Center at Dawson Place and Behavioral Health Services. Applied for a grant before.
Well, they have applied.
They've done it on other ones.
We just never gave them any money.
So,
Yeah, it's, Child Advocacy Center, at Dawson Place. They do, so Child Advocacy Center in and of itself is a fantastic building.
right.
To be completely, transparent with history also, it's like we have given, CDBG funds for restroom improvements to this facility a couple years ago. They do come, they have been human needs or sub-recipients in the past. I believe that there's a Cribs to Kids program that we funded and maybe one or two other ones. Again, this was a kind of human needs kind of, 2017 kind of fund. That being said, the one that's presented, here is, it does meet behavioral health. When staff looked at doing a funding recommendation, we actually had to dive into the budget a little bit and ended up seeing that there was $10,000 that was allocated for supplies to directly support the behavioral health service program that they're talking about. And then other funds were allocated to utility or other kind of administrative facility support. And so what we're trying to do here is trying to have a focus on service delivery. That's really what we want these funds to go towards. I am also going to call it out and say that the staff is also revisiting indirect cost allocations right now and our own policy on that, more of a federal component of it, but we really want to have a lot of our dollars go, and we understand that agencies are having to navigate a very interesting funding year with trying to get more help for overhead and administrative expenses, but we have such a small and finite pool of funds that these dollars are meant to go really towards service delivery provisions. And so that's why you have a reduced award at $10,000 and not the full ask at $20,000.
Okay, thank you, that helps.
Okay, Susan?
So what if we take the $20,000 from the Salvation Army and add, not to necessarily to Dawson Place because of what Kembra just said, but bump all these other mental health support systems up a bit? I was thinking.
Okay. Well, I was going to say let's finish going through them, and then we can come back to making adjustments.
Okay, sure.
So, and maybe it's just get the starting point of agreeing with staff funding recommendations for this section, and then we can come back to that.
And then back.
And then back.
Okay.
Then we can say, well, we can make adjustments. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, first I'll ask Molly, online?
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm trying to figure out sort of the math that got to the staff funding recommendations, which basically seems like a split the difference approach between the request and the reduced request. So I have no strong feelings about these. The staff recommendations look good.
Okay, so Molly's good there. Josh?
Yeah, I think all of these look pretty good to me, at least as a start.
Okay, and Michael?
I concur.
Okay. And I concur, and in fact, Susan's concurring, so we'll fill these in. Okay, and then we'll bring up the next one is the Shack Art Center, and so we'll just do our process here of seeing if agreement with staff funding recommendations, and we'll start with Molly again.
I guess this is just one of those places where I would love to get them to their 2020. I would love to get the ARC to their 2023 award at least. So if we could if we could find $5,000 somewhere, I think that would be great. Maybe it's from Salvation Army.
So this one is they didn't get a 2023 award. This is a new program. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about ARC.
ARC. Okay, you've jumped down to ARC. Okay.
Oh, sorry. I'm looking at. Oh, sorry. I was supposed to be on Shack. Yeah, I mean, I think I love the Shack Art Center. I do wonder quite how tied to our mission and goals it is, and $20,000 is a lot, and a lot more actually than many of the other organizations are getting. So I wonder if we might consider bumping that down a bit more, and yeah, giving it to one of the other organizations who's not getting its minimum request.
Okay. Josh? We're just looking at the Shack right now.
I think I'm kind of in line with Molly. I think it's an important thing, and I definitely could see like giving funding to it. But yeah, like the 46,000 seems like a lot, especially in comparison to what some of these others are requesting. But yeah, I do think it's important. I mean, I would definitely say probably between 15 to 20 would be my thought. But yeah, I do think the other things above should take precedence over this.
Michael?
Yeah, I agree with Josh, actually. I think about 15 to 20 would be good, and everything else is kind of taking precedence over this 46K number.
Okay. And Susan?
I'm okay with the amount or reducing it a little bit.
Okay. So, you know, for my preference, when I read through, I thought a little bit less to start with in this first funding go-around for them. And so I'm wondering if the committee could agree on 15,000 for the Shack. Sir? Any objections? We'll do it that way. Silence is approval, so staff, would you put 15 in that one? Okay, and so let's go down to these other services and look at what has been recommended here. And we'll start with Molly, and I think you were going with some comments before, so go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I was saying I would love to get the ARC up to its minimum request, which would need to take 5,000 from somewhere else. So I would propose that come from Shack, as we've already done, or from Salvation Army.
Okay. Great. Josh?
I do think that what they have, or yeah, I mean, I do agree that I would like to get ARC up there too, to at least their minimum, or reduce ask. Yeah, it doesn't look like a huge difference between the other two, between their reduced ask and their total ask. I mean, of course, it would be nice to be able to like give them a little more, but yeah, just looking at the like percentage from what is being suggested versus their total, yeah, because the ArcLight one, like the 20,000 is only 50% of their total ask, whereas the other two are getting at least 60%. Yeah, so I would say we can find a way to find a little more funding to put towards the ARC, just to at least get them at base to their reduced request.
Right, and Michael?
I would agree with that as well, and yeah, I'm going to go ahead and yield my time. I agree with that.
I make a staff
Yeah.
comment once you're finished.
Okay, yeah, we can add $5,000 to the ARC.
All right, yeah, I think the reason, when we were putting the funding recommendations together, it didn't look like they were going to spend out their full 2023 award, so I think that's why staff didn't put the $25,000 or $25,000 minimum. But now they've gotten a couple more pay requests in that it looks like they are going to be closer to spending out their award. Okay. So that's kind of why staff, plus it's not a priority. I mean, it's a wonderful program and everything, but it's just so, you know, yeah.
Okay. Okay, what I'm hearing is that committee would like to move the ARC to 25,000, with the 5,000 from the shack for that one. So, and then the other two at the 10,000 level that's recommended. And I agree with that as well. Okay. All right. So let's head back up top. Talk about the Salvation Army rental assistance item.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm sure this is me forgetting the different rules of the different funds, but rental assistance was a very popular category in our previous conversation in October, where we gave out lots of funding for rental assistance. And I'm wondering why this one is here as opposed to there. Is there something about it that makes it in scope for this funding that the others, it's the only rental assistance one in this round of funding and it wasn't in the others?
Very attentive, Molly. Thank you for asking this question. Some of this is just the nature of the funding cycle. So we go out for application for the federal and the state funds. Not somewhat overlaps, but those go out first, and then this application round gets rolled out a little bit later. So there's a little bit of just application difference timing on that one. And I'm just mentioning that, not that has a huge difference on this. But I believe also that the Salvation Army, and having just an inkling of maybe prior conversations around some of this, may not be able to navigate the CDBG funding as well. And sometimes we run into similar instances with this when we end up having other agencies. I'm trying to think, Red Cross is one, where you have this national umbrella of the big national organization and then local chapters. And so then it becomes kind of hard to be able to navigate some of the federal nuances when you have more of a local chapter application instead of it being an actual true nonprofit that's established here with their own fiscal controls and accounting and the whole gamut for what an organization usually needs for support. So some of it is making me think that there may have been a prior conversation on not being able to navigate this, the federal funding that we had previously. You're absolutely right. Also, a lot of the times when we end up seeing rental assistance, it has been under CDBG. Some of that's carried forward because CDBG was the funding source for COVID impact funds. And so rental assistance had a huge infusion through CDBG in the last few years. But I can't remember if we've had conversations with Salvation Army on use of federal funds for those specific applications. So it just wasn't a conversation that we ended up having with them at this time. I think it just was the nature of when this was rolled out and them wanting to apply under a more flexible funding source. And I say flexible because it just doesn't have, instead of federal regulation compliance oversight, they need to just have municipal oversight with the use of the public funds. So.
Other comments? Josh or Michael? Any proposals? Yes, I have a proposal. Okay. Right. I would propose that we would fund the Salvation Army at $10,000 as a minimum, and use the other $10,000 to apply to a couple of the other areas. I'll get the committee to help me with that, and that because it's the first year funding, that perhaps you're able to monitor and report back, you know, in the next year that they ask for the rental assistance to ensure that they're meeting, that there's no discrimination. So, because there's a concern. So, and we can't discern their definition of family in their application. So I'll just offer that up, and then we've got a hand from Michael.
I just wanted to clarify, was that a motion?
I'm not making a motion. We're in the funding recommendation, and so I'm just offering a suggestion on the funding for this, just to get the committee going in terms of discussing and coming to some resolution on this. I would compromise and say 5,000. I believe our minimum is 10,000, given the way that we've agreed with staff on these funding awards.
So just to have more, just to pull this thread a little bit more for the discussion. So to that, I would actually want to kind of come back to the committee and then say, so if we're going to do $10,000, a couple of things. Think about how far $10,000 can really reach when we're talking about rental assistance. So just recognizing that the impact is maybe less, when we're talking about how far that can go. And then also to kind of think about, so what would we see as a success, right? Knowing that some of this information that we want to track, which is anti-discrimination, and being able to see that they have an equitable allocation of who they ended up giving the rental assistance to. Not everyone wants to disclose all of their personal information. Furthermore, of course, whether it's even something that, again, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but you guys have recently seen their application, so I don't know if that's even a required field, right? So again, you have something where I would actually want to come back to the committee and say, okay, great, fantastic, you want to do $10,000, but what does a successful use of these funds look like, knowing that some information we may just not be able to collect it. Also, if we end up only serving 2 families with 3 months of rent assistance each with $10,000, what does that really look like for success on that if you've only had 2 families that have been served or something else? So this is just me to come back to. Thank you for the suggestion. I like the fact that we're having good discussion on it. I want to make some clarifications so that staff can understand how to successfully carry forward this recommendation.
Michael?
then I'm for that. Then I think 10,000 is fair.
Are there other comments? Josh?
I would agree with the 10,000 for the first year, because I mean, we don't have anything else to base off of since it's their first year asking from us. And I mean, they obviously were getting funding previously from elsewhere for this. And yeah, I don't want to completely, compromise my beliefs as well. So, or, my understanding of their past and stuff, but at the same time, I do understand the need for it. So.
Molly?
I'm okay with it.
Well, it's either 10,000 or it's nothing for me, really. But I do want to give them the benefit of the doubt of I want more clarification. I want to know locally, what are their practices, what are their beliefs, and we can have that conversation. I mean, I'm happy to go there and just say, who are you, what are you, what, So I guess the bottom line is in the space of time and whatever, $10,000 would be okay for me.
Okay, so for
Hearing that it's not gonna do a lot, but it's better than nothing. It's 2 families versus 0 families, so.
absolutely correct.
Okay.
Totally fine to be able to carry that forward. If the committee would like to make that change, 2 points just for us to revisit on this. It is less than their reduced request. It's our floor, but it is less than the reduced request, so it's entirely possible sometimes the agencies get their reduced request or even less than that, and they end up going, you know what, we revisited the numbers and we just cannot make this work. It's too much work to be able to carry it forward. So I would say the first thing is that I would encourage the committee, as we've done in the past, to also identify if there's a contingency project that they would like to increase the funding for in case Salvation Army decides that $10,000 is not enough or to be able to effectively administer the funds. So identify a contingency project just in case. And also come back and just again provide clarification so that staff understands so we can move forward with meeting the concerns that were presented here tonight. When we talk about success, what we usually do when we have measurements for period performance under a grant is we ask for number of persons or households or whatever their metric is. We need to know what that number is. So when we bring this back for review to the committee to show, successful implementation of use of funds, is the committee saying that they would be okay if we just came back with information of 2 households were served? Is the committee asking that we need to have demographics of those 2 households? Is the committee asking that we need to see how long the rental assistance payments were? And I'm only asking this, it's not as if we cannot ask and work with the agency to collect this information, but it would be good for staff to be aware of these considerations before I draft the agreement and be able to build some of this for expectations and deliverables throughout the period of expenditure. So what would the committee say would be a successful implementation to be able to bring information back for further review?
Molly, you have your hand up.
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So my experience with this sort of thing is it's not about the outcome and the demographics of who got the rental assistance. It's about documentation and evidence of the process to show that there wasn't discrimination. And so the kind of evidence that I need to provide when I'm the grantee doing this kind of things is around what is the policy, and then what kind of evidence can you show that you were following the policy as you awarded and selected these families for rental housing. And so, there's all sorts of different types of documentation that can provide that evidence. I'm sure others have examples of that. So to me, it's more about evidence of the implementation of the policy rather than the outcomes.
I would like to understand their definition of family. Okey dokey? I need to go back.
Agreed.
Okay, so, well, I think we navigated that okay. We'll put $10,000 in there for Salvation Army rental assistance. We know that we want to understand their process and definition of family
And their policy.
and their policies. Okay, with that,
We now have $10,000 left.
yeah, and I was looking at this and wondering if, it wouldn't be appropriate to go ahead and do, 5,000 up to Cocoon House for Journeys, and to do 5,000 into legal aid, so.
Have you already included any sort of increase to ARC?
Yeah, we did.
We did, we brought them up to,
Okay.
25,000.
right.
Oh, okay.
And then I would further go that the 10,000, if they don't accept the award, that it would, to have it go to Interfaith Family Shelter Scattered Site Support.
Not putting anything in behavior.
So that was just
Which is
my-
always mine.
Okay, so I'm open to comments.
This is, I think, out of order, but this is a staff comment that
Okay.
I recollected. You talked about potentially giving the extra $5,000 to Cocoon House Journeys. One thing that I noted with the Compass Health program, which takes place at Cocoon House,
Yes,
is that if reduced funding might reduce the position to part-time, which then it might be hard to retain staff. So just putting that out there, that
So-
was one thing in their
so maybe,
application. That because you're talking about Cocoon House,
Right.
this
right.
is a program at Cocoon House,
Yes,
run
so
by
there
Compass
would-
Health,
there'd be-
but it's
couple of them there, so. Okay,
pretty much.
so, like to hear other thoughts? So we have essentially $10,000 that we want to kind of assign within the priorities, either staying within the Housing Choices for All, or, looks like going down to behavioral health would be the next area, so. Okay, Susan?
I would definitely like to see, that Recovery Cafe and or the Compass Health program with Cocoon House bumped up a bit.
So maybe the, 5,000 to the Compass Health Cocoon House Partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then scroll back down, Kimbra. Got that in there for the ARC. The other two are at their reduced ask. We've got the, if you scroll back up now, so that we look at behavioral health. So,
Because that takes them closer to their ask, their,
okay,
not their reduced ask, but their, my view.
okay, and if you did 5,000 in the behavioral health for Compass Health at Cocoon House, and instead of 5,000 up top for there, if you put that into YWCA Homeward House Collaborative, put the other 5,000 there.
Actually, I was talking about the Recovery Cafe, but. Yeah, I'm the only one talking right now.
Right.
Does Anybody opposed to that idea, or does anybody else have other ideas?
Well, I would agree with that because with the 35,000 for the YWCA, that's almost 83% of their request. But leaving the Everett recovery, leaving them at 22,500 is only 75% of their request. So I think if we were to give it to either one of those, I would agree with the Recovery Cafe, because that's going to bring them closer to their ask. So brings them up to 91% of their ask.
Right, okay, so hearing support to move, add 5,000 to Recovery Cafe and 5,000 to the Compass Health line.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Molly and Michael?
I'm on board with that.
That's fine with me.
So could we look at now how we are, so make sure we've balanced? Okay.
And I would also remind that we also need to just make sure we identify. Right, contingency.
You guys are zeroed out. Okay, the contingency that I was recommending was for the interfaith shelter.
Sure. I don't have a problem with that.
I think that they would, they've said they've found other money, but, I think that they're serving a very diverse and wide variety of people, and that would be good. So.
Yeah, I would support that.
So Michael and Molly, would you support the contingency for interfaith?
Yes, I'm on board with that.
Yep, that's good.
Okay, and Susan?
Yes.
Okay, and I am, so I think we have gotten through the funding. Okay. Let's take a look at what we did, you guys. Woo-hoo! Okay. Scroll through and see that we've got the okay. So, back to where I was. Right. Okay, we've all had a chance to comment, we've all had a chance to input, and it looks like we've got a funding recommendation. I'd like to entertain a motion and a second to approve the funding recommendation.
I motion to approve our funding recommendations.
I'll second it.
And second, so it's been moved and seconded, the funding recommendations are approved. Yay. All right, so I think at this point, we turn the meeting back to staff.
Yeah, so thank you. Man, you guys had a good meeting tonight, and thank you to everybody who showed up both virtually and in person and stayed with us. At this time, if anybody is a guest and they would like to leave, you're more than welcome to do that, or you can stay for staff updates, which is and next steps, which is always exciting. So, a couple of different things that I want to just make sure I mention tonight. Besides, thank you everyone for being just absolutely fantastic and having very open, good dialogue. I always very much appreciate it personally when we have good open communication between committee members and also with our agencies that come. And so I just want to thank everyone for, thank you for the comment, Jane. Just want to thank everyone for doing that. It can be hard to navigate some of the conversation topics sometimes, but you guys all tend to do it with grace. So thank you so much. So staff updates, some exciting stuff. We did have the committee appreciation event that was Tuesday night. Unfortunately, it's also the reason why I'm masking. But to that extent, we do want to go ahead and recognize that we actually created a appreciation a recognition for one of our committee members. And I'm going to go ahead and call them out tonight. So Susan Mosshart, thank you so much for continuing to lead the committee. I'm going to give the 2-minute spiel that we would have given that night, which is that Susan joined us in January of 2020, and I don't think that any of us really understood what was going to happen that year or the subsequent years, but Susan has been just so important. She stepped up and filled a chair role. She continued to be chair. She helped us in implementing a lot of the Amplifund grant management software and gave wonderful insight. And so this was our ability to say a heartfelt thank you to Susan for her dedicated years of service. And we still get her for a few more years, which is fantastic. So next year we hope to see everyone at the event, hopefully, and we can give thanks to everybody at that time. It's a good thing for the city to pick this back up. It's been about 4 years since we've done it, so it's really nice to see that we have the ability to do it again. In addition to that, to stay on the committee structure kind of conversation, we have a couple openings currently right now, and we have already gone out and conducted interviews, and we are looking at a few strong applicants that we're going to be looking to invite onto the committee. That appointment will be happening in January. I think we have 1 or 2 kind of more housekeeping things in the background with the applicants that we have, but we very much are looking forward to welcoming new committee members regardless in the after the first of the year. So just want to get everybody excited about that. I'm also going to remind everyone that this next year is one of our more dynamic years. We're going to have some real fun stuff going on with the consolidated plan. I want to give a heads up and a thank you to those that have already signed up for subcommittees, and also remind everyone that is with us tonight that if you're interested in doing a subcommittee, first let us know so we can see if quorum has been reached on it, and if we have to go through public notice process. But the whole intent, if you were unable to be aware of this previous discussion, was that the consolidated plan, which is a guiding long-range 5-year document that will be overseeing our rollout of CDBG and home funds, and also a lot of the other human needs response efforts that we do with all the funding that we have that comes our way for the next 5 years. And we try and maintain those goals and priorities that we go through for identification with the consolidated plan every time we meet and you guys have funding recommendations. So one of the big things that we have to do, because this takes about 1.5 years for us to get through this preparation of this plan, is we have to go through at least a 6-month public engagement process, which means that we are asking committee members to become advocates and champions in their community, which you guys are also already beautifully doing, and we're hoping that you can continue to do this because staff, we can prepare everything, we can try and do our best to get the word out, but we can only, I think, go so far. You guys are the ones in the community that have the relationships. They're able to meet with people. It's also, some people do not want to fill out a survey for the government, regardless if it's anonymous or not. And so that's something that, you know, we try and be mindful of. So we want to have people that are able to go out and meet with those that are unable to get voiced otherwise, and bring those priority needs, those identification of what that community needs, of what that person needs, of what that household needs, back to staff, and so that we will compile all this together. And again, we're going to start a 6-month process on this, and then we present it during our public needs public hearing that we have in August. So what does that mean? Well, this is all about to kick off in February. So So what we're going to be seeing is that this next year is going to be fairly dynamic. We're going to be making some really strong deliverables for the committee members, I'm going to say. If there's ever a time to show up, be active, be present, be engaged, be excited, this next year is the year to do it. And staff's going to be fairly diligent on that. You know, we, as I mentioned earlier, Vicki and I are a very small, lean team, and we really need to be able to rely on those that are plugged in to the community to be able to help to get input on this. We have a calendar that I will present to you all in February that is going to lay out what our efforts are going to be for the next year and a half. It will not only include the public engagement component that you guys will be doing, but it will also touch on other research efforts that we have to do. We have to do a market analysis, we have to do strategic plan analysis, we have to do a couple other different fun things, and then of course the thing that also is going to go on simultaneous with this that HUD requires is a report that is affirmatively furthering fair housing report. And it is something that we've done in the past, which is it looks at any impediments to fair housing. So it will, to some of the earlier discussion points that we talked about today, it will look at discrimination practices, anything that's been filed with the state that's within the city of Everett limits, any claims that have been made against landlords, any unfair zoning practices that the city has in place. This is a third-party consultant that we hire that basically is going to really air dirty laundry for fair housing for the community. And so this is something that we are mandated to do, and that will go on next year. So it's all to say that, you know, not to get too long-winded on this, we are getting late in the evening, but that I cannot emphasize the point enough that this, if there is ever a time to really start digging into this committee's work, it will be this next year. And staff is going to do everything that we can to give everyone the tools and the supplies to be successful in reaching out to the community, but we cannot do this without you. We will be doing our own kind of in-house, open house, kind of, we're talking department heads, other committees that we have, and we have 18 of them, as that was reminded Tuesday night, neighborhood groups, but again, as far as meeting with social agencies, other human service organizations, even just clubs that meet, you guys are going to help us do that, and so we're excited for that. So the subcommittees, again, I believe last time we talked about having one that was going to help lead with public engagement, and then another subcommittee that's going to continue to help us in improving our application and review standards, because that was another thing that we realized in the last funding cycle, is that we are still not having full equitable review, and we have got to get to a point where we can adequately do this.
Can we take a survey of committee members to find out what the resistance or the what hang up is?
I think that's a fantastic idea.
I think want to know what is your user friendliness? What's stopping you?
Yeah, and what would you prefer to see? One, I mean, in the past we used to do printed notebooks. I will say that I would that was a labor. I don't know if that was a labor of love. That was a labor for staff to get. We used to provide, I think, 13 printed notebooks, and you guys got them all delivered to your homes. It would be great if we could continue to move forward in the electronic process that we have, but I think that these kind of questions are needed for us to be able to ask this point. The caveat to that is that you have got to be able to also have people complete the survey to get the feedback on it. So I think that if there's ever a theme for this next year, it's accountability and engagement. I think that that's probably all I have, besides the fact that this next year, and when we meet again, so again, anticipate that we're going to have a more regular meeting schedule, at least once a month, with subcommittees meeting interchangeably between then. But starting in February, I would also just keep in mind that we're going to start and revisit officer positions, and being able to elect, or I guess welcome, we have a vice chair who was unable to attend tonight, but would be somebody to step up, or that we have somebody else that is interested and or somebody that wants to be a vice chair. So just think about officer appointment being in February as well. Anything else?
I think she covered it perfectly, and she timed it perfectly because I put adjourn at 6:20. So
I'm amazed. I know that we adjourned this meeting. I'll entertain that motion now.
Somebody has to second it.
Thank you all, but as you were getting this motion, but just thank you everyone for, being with us and everything you've done to support, the committee and the community development, component of this and helping with all of your, input and everything that you do for the committee. So, thank you, and, we hope you have a great rest of your holiday season.
All right, so we have the motion, we need the second to adjourn.
I'll second
will
the
second it.
motion.
Okay, so now we've got it. So it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
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 You're officially adjourned.
Have a happy holiday,
Okay.
everybody.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Happy holidays.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.